Have you ever lived next to someone for years? I'm Rose, and this is English Through Situations.
And I'm Jack. Today, we are exploring a story about a neighbor who was completely silent until one rainy Tuesday when he did something very unexpected.
Exactly. Welcome to a brand new episode of our English Through Mystery Stories series. Today's title is The Neighbor Who Never Smiled.
We are going to use this strange little mystery to help you practice describing people's personalities, talking about emotions, and making logical guesses in English. All of this is designed for a B1 level, so it will be easy to follow, but full of great vocabulary.
If you have ever wondered what is going on behind your neighbor's closed door, this episode is for you. Let's get right into the story. Our story begins in an old, quiet apartment building in the city. The kind of building with heavy wooden doors, narrow hallways, and floors that make a little noise when you walk.
A young woman named Clara moved into apartment 3B. She was friendly, talkative, and always tried to build a good relationship with the people around her.
But there was one person who did not want to build a relationship at all. That was Mr. Elias, the man who lived in apartment 3A, right across the hall from Clara.
Mr. Elias was an older man, maybe in his late 60s. He always wore a neat gray suit, even just to go to the grocery store. He carried a dark umbrella and walked with a very steady, slow rhythm.
But the most noticeable thing about Mr. Elias was his silence. He never spoke, and he never, ever smiled.
When Clara moved in, she tried to introduce herself. She stood in the hallway, smiled brightly, and said, "Hi, I'm Clara. I just moved into 3B.
Mr. Elias stopped. He looked at her for a second. His face showed absolutely no emotion. He simply nodded once, turned around, unlocked his door, and went inside. Click! The door locked.
Clara thought, okay, maybe he is just having a bad day. But weeks turned into months. Every time they passed each other in the hallway or the lobby, Clara would say, "Good morning," or "Nice weather today."
And every single time, Mr. Elias would give the exact same reaction. A single, silent nod. No smile, no words, just a flat, blank expression.
Soon, Clara started to feel a bit uncomfortable. It is natural to feel uneasy when someone refuses to interact with you. She started to invent stories in her head. Maybe he was an ex-spy. Maybe he hated young people. Maybe he was hiding a dark secret in apartment 3A.
We all do that, right? When we don't have facts, our brains create mysteries. Clara even started checking to see if his light was under the door before she left her apartment, just to avoid an awkward silence in the hallway.
Then autumn arrived. The weather turned cold and rainy. It was a miserable Tuesday evening. Clara came home from work feeling exhausted. She had a terrible headache. Her umbrella had broken in the wind, and she was dripping wet.
She climbed the stairs slowly. When she reached the third floor, she looked down at her doormat. There was something sitting right in front of her door.
It was not a package. It was not a misdelivered letter. It was a small, perfectly folded paper boat. It was made from a bright yellow piece of paper.
Clara frowned. She picked it up. It was completely dry, which meant someone had placed it there recently. She looked at Mr. Elias's door. It was firmly closed, as always, no light showing underneath.
She took the paper boat inside. When she sat down at a kitchen table, she realized the boat was not empty. Tucked inside the folds of the paper was a small, square photograph.
It was an old Polaroid photo. The colors were faded. It showed a picture of the exact hallway outside her apartment. But in the photo, the walls were painted a different color, and right where Clara's door was, stood a young man.
The young man was wearing a gray suit, and he was smiling. A massive, bright, happy smile.
Clara stared at the face. She recognized the eyes and the sharp jawline. It was a very young Mr. Elias.
But that wasn't the strangest part. Clara flipped the photograph over. On the back, written in very neat, elegant handwriting, was a single sentence. Look behind the wooden panel.
Clara's heart started beating faster. She walked back to her front door. She examined the door frame, and for the first time she noticed that one of the wooden panels near the floor was slightly loose. Okay, let's pause the story right there. I don't know about you, Jack, but I would be a little bit freaked out if my silent neighbor left me a clue like that.
I think anyone would be surprised. It is a massive change in behavior. Going from zero communication for months to leaving a secret message is definitely a strange situation.
Let's talk about the English we can use to describe this kind of neighbor. Clara initially thought Mr. Elias was unfriendly, but there are more descriptive ways to talk about someone who is very quiet.
Exactly. A great phrase to use here is to keep to oneself. If you keep to yourself, it means you avoid contact with other people and prefer to be alone.
We could say, Mr. Elias always kept to himself. It sounds a bit more polite than saying he was antisocial. It just means he valued his privacy.
Another good adjective is withdrawn. A withdrawn person is quiet and does not want to communicate with others.
Yes, and we can also use the word distant. If someone is distant, they seem far away emotionally, even if they are physically close to you. Mr. Elias was a very distant neighbor.
Now let's look at Clara's reaction. Before the paper boat incident, Clara was feeling uneasy. This is a perfect B1 level word. It means feeling slightly worried or uncomfortable about a situation.
You can use it in many situations. I felt uneasy walking down the dark street, or the silent room made her feel uneasy. Clara felt uneasy because she couldn't understand Mr. Elias's behavior.
And what did Clara do because she felt uneasy? She started inventing stories. She started guessing. In English, when you make a guess without having all the facts, we call this jumping to conclusions.
I love that phrase, to jump to conclusions. It means you form an opinion too quickly. Clara jumped to the conclusion that Mr. Elias was hiding a dark secret just because he didn't smile.
It is a very common human reaction. Now, the paper boat changes everything. It is a clue. When we have a clue, we stop jumping to wild conclusions and we start making logical hypotheses.
This is a great time to practice our modals of deduction. These are words like must be, could be, and might be. We use them when we are guessing what is true based on evidence.
Right. Let's look at the evidence. The boat was completely dry on a rainy day. What can we deduce from that?
We can say, the person who left the boat must live in the building. They didn't come from outside or the boat would be wet, so it must be a neighbor.
Exactly. Must be shows strong certainty. Now, what about the young man in the photo? We can say, the man in the photo might be Mr. Elias. We are not 100% sure yet, but it is a strong possibility.
And the message on the back, look behind the wooden panel. We could say, there could be a secret hidden in the wall. Could be shows it is possible, but we are just guessing.
Let's role-play a quick conversation. Imagine we are Clara's friends, and she just called us to tell us about the photo.
Okay, I will be Clara. Hey, Jack, you won't believe what just happened. My silent neighbor left an old photo at my door with a hidden message.
Wait, what? The guy who never smiles? Why would he do that out of the blue?
I have no idea. The message says to look behind a panel in my doorway. Do you think I should look? What if it's something dangerous?
It can't be dangerous. He is an old man who keeps to himself. He must be trying to tell you something about the building. I think you should check the panel.
That was a perfect use of deduction. It can't be dangerous means you are almost certain it is safe. He must be trying to tell you something means you strongly believe this is his goal.
Let's go back to the story and find out what Clara actually does. Does she open the panel?
Clara knelt down on the wooden floor of her hallway. She looked closely at the wooden panel near the bottom of her door frame.
It looked completely normal at first glance, but when she pushed it gently with her finger, she felt it move. There was a tiny gap between the wood and the wall.
She carefully slid her fingernails into the gap and pulled. The small wooden board popped off surprisingly easily. Behind it, there was a small, dark hole carved into the wall.
Clara held her breath. She turned on her phone's flashlight and pointed it into the hole. There was something inside. It was a small, dusty metal tin, like an old candy box.
She reached in and pulled it out. The metal was cold. She opened the lid slowly. Inside, there were no diamonds, no spy gadgets, and no dark secrets.
Instead, there were 3 items: a beautiful silver key, a dried red rose that had turned brown with age, and a piece of paper folded into a square.
Clara opened the paper. It was a letter. The handwriting was the same elegant style as the message on the back of the photograph. The letter began, "To whoever finds this, my name is Elias."
Clara sat on the floor and read the letter. It was a voice from the past. Elias wrote that 50 years ago he lived in apartment 3B, Clara's current apartment.
He wrote about a girl named Martha who lived across the hall in 3A. He was terribly in love with her. They used to leave secret messages for each other under the loose wooden panel so their parents wouldn't know.
The silver key belonged to a small music box he had bought for her. The red rose was from their first date. He wrote that they were supposed to get married, but a tragic illness took Martha away very suddenly.
The letter ended with these words. After she was gone, I moved into her apartment, 3A, to feel closer to her memory. I locked away these treasures because it hurt too much to look at them. But the walls of 3B should not be entirely silent. They hold a happy history. If you are reading this, I hope your life in this apartment is as full of joy as mine once was. Please, keep the key and leave the panel open.
Clara finished reading. She looked up at the door of apartment 3A. Suddenly, the silence of Mr. Elias didn't feel cold or unfriendly anymore. It felt heavy with memory. It was the silence of someone who had lost a piece of their heart.
She realized he wasn't keeping to himself because he hated people. He was keeping to himself because he was living in the past. And leaving the boat for her was his way of passing the history of the apartment to the next generation.
Clara carefully put the rose and the letter back into the tin and placed it back in the wall, but she kept the silver key.
The next morning, Clara left her apartment to go to work. The hallway was bright with morning sunlight. As she locked her door, Mr. Elias stepped out of 3A.
He wore his usual gray suit. He carried his dark umbrella. He stopped and looked at Clara.
Clara didn't say good morning. She simply looked at him, smiled softly, and held up the silver key so he could see it.
Mr. Elias looked at the key. He looked at Clara, and for the first time in all the months she had lived there, the corners of his mouth moved. He gave her a very small, very gentle, and very sad smile. Then he nodded once and walked slowly down the stairs.
Wow, that completely changes how we view Mr. Elias. This is why we shouldn't jump to conclusions about people we don't know.
Absolutely. It is a beautiful but slightly sad story, and it gives us a lot of excellent vocabulary to talk about understanding people's true situations.
Let's analyze what happened. Clara experienced a huge shift in perspective. A shift in perspective means you suddenly see a situation from a completely different point of view.
Before she found the box, she thought his silence was cold. After she read the letter, she realized his silence was full of grief. Grief is a strong B1 level word for deep sadness, especially after someone dies.
We could say, he was consumed by grief, or his silence was a result of his grief. It explains everything perfectly.
This story also teaches us a useful idiom, more than meets the eye. When there is more to a situation than meets the eye, it means the situation is more complex or interesting than it appears on the surface.
For example, I thought Mr. Elias was just an angry old man, but there was a lot more to him than meets the eye. It's a great phrase for mystery stories.
Let's also look at the phrase, to come across as. This is crucial for describing first impressions. Clara's first impression was that he was unfriendly.
So we can say, Mr. Elias came across as unfriendly. This doesn't mean he actually was unfriendly. It just means that is how he appeared to other people.
Exactly. He came across as cold, but he was actually just grieving. It is a much more advanced and natural way to describe someone's behavior than just saying he looked cold.
Another interesting phrase from the story is out of the blue. You used this earlier, Jack. When something happens out of the blue, it happens completely unexpectedly, without any warning.
Yes. Mr. Elias left a clue out of the blue. Clara wasn't expecting it at all. It is a very natural idiom that native speakers use all the time.
So let's connect all these pieces. Clara felt uneasy because Mr. Elias kept to himself and came across as distant. She jumped to conclusions. But then, out of the blue, she found a clue. This clue caused a shift in perspective, and she realized there was more to him than meets the eye.
That is a perfect summary using all our key vocabulary. It shows how learning words in context helps you remember how to use them together naturally to tell a story.
All right, it is time to clearly review the most useful phrases from today's story. Let's do a quick language focus.
First phrase, to keep to oneself.
Meaning, to avoid spending time with other people, to prefer being alone.
Example, he was a quiet neighbor who always kept to himself.
Let's repeat that together. To keep to oneself.
Second phrase, to come across as.
Meaning, the impression that someone gives to other people.
Example, during the meeting, she came across as very confident.
Let's try that one. To come across as.
Third phrase, to jump to conclusions.
Meaning, to guess the facts about a situation too quickly, usually in a negative way.
Example, don't jump to conclusions before you hear the whole story.
Your turn to jump to conclusions.
Fourth phrase, out of the blue.
Meaning, happening suddenly and completely unexpectedly.
Example, I hadn't seen him in years, and then he called me out of the blue.
Let's repeat. Out of the blue.
And our last phrase, more than meets the eye.
Meaning, a situation or person is more complicated or interesting than they seem at first.
Example, this quiet little town has more than meets the eye.
Let's say it together. More than meets the eye. Now it's your turn. We want to know what you think about today's situation.
Imagine you are living in Clara's apartment. You have a neighbor who never speaks to you, never smiles, and seems completely distant.
Then, out of the blue, you find a small paper boat at your door with an old photograph inside.
What would be your very first thought? Would you be scared, curious, or annoyed?
Write a sentence or two in the comments below. Try to use one of the phrases we learned today. For example, you could start with, I think I would jump to the conclusion that, or, I would feel uneasy because.
We read all the comments, and it is a fantastic way to practice your English writing in a real situation.
So today, we followed the mystery of a silent neighbor, learned not to jump to conclusions, and practiced B1 level vocabulary for describing personalities, making guesses, and expressing emotions.
And remember, learning English is not just about memorizing grammar rules. It is about understanding human situations, reading between the lines, and knowing the right words to describe what is really happening.
Don't forget to answer our question in the comments. What would you think if you found that paper boat at your door?
If this story helped you learn something new today, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a friend who is also learning English.
You've been watching English Through Situations.
Real English, real situations, better conversations.
We will see you in the next mystery.